The year is 2025, but not our 2025. The Berlin-Tokyo axis governs the world, and the silence is the first thing you notice. It's not a peaceful quiet, but the dense, controlled hush of a planet under permanent curfew. There are no global social networks, no chaotic news feeds, no roar of international travel. Instead, there is the low hum of state-approved broadcasts and the distant, rhythmic march of boots on synchronized patrols. This is the world that was born not in 1945 with an Allied victory parade, but in the stark, frozen winter of 1941, when history pivoted on three hinges that all swung the wrong way. First, the Luftwaffe, under Gring's uncharacteristically focused command, never shifted to bombing London. They broke the RAF on its airfields. By October 1940, skies gray with German transport planes crossed the Channel. Operation Sea Lion, a chaotic, bloody gamble, succeeded because the British Navy, bombed to splinters in its southern ports, couldn't fully interdict the flow. Winston Churchill's last broadcast was a static, cracked epitaph for liberty before the Waffen-SS stormed Downing Street. With Britain a puppet regime named the Anglo-Saxon Administrative Zone, the Atlantic Wall became an internal border. America lost its unsinkable aircraft carrier. Second, without the need to prop up a Mediterranean front, Hitler did not divert troops to a meaningless Balkan campaign. Army Group Center drove on Moscow unimpeded in August 1941. They took the city in a brutal siege before the first snows. The capture was more psychological than tactical, but it worked. The Soviet command structure shattered. Stalin was killed in the Kremlin's fall not by a German bullet, but by a desperate Politburo member hoping to broker a peace. The USSR didn't surrender so much as it fragmented into a burning, anarchic hinterland of warlords and partisan bands, easily mopped up by the Wehrmacht over the next 2 years. The endless steppe became Lebensraum. Third, and most crucially, in June 1942, the U.S. Pacific Fleet did not get lucky at Midway. Japanese intelligence was not compromised. Admiral Yamamoto's carrier force found the Americans first. In a single sun-blazed afternoon, the Enterprise, Yorktown, and Hornet were sent to the bottom. With the U.S. Navy's fist broken, Japan invaded and secured Hawaii by year's end. The psychic shock to the American mainland was terminal. With Nazi Europe unchallenged and the Pacific a Japanese lake, the Germany First policy became a grotesque joke. President Roosevelt, facing an election in 1944, bowed to the inevitable. The Treaty of Reykjavik in 1945 formalized the New World Order, the Western Hemisphere, neutered and demilitarized under U.S. stewardship. Everything east of the Atlantic and west of Hawaii, divided between the two victorious empires. What followed was not peace, but a permanent, frozen war of consolidation. The Nazis implemented Generalplan Ost with a chilling bureaucratic precision. Cities like Warsaw, Kyiv, and the razed ghost of Moscow were wiped from new maps. In their place rose fortified Wehrbauer settlements, model Aryan towns connected by autobahns that cut through endless state-run grain fields worked by Slavic serfs. The Holocaust was completed, then erased. By the 1960s, Jew was a historical curiosity taught in racial science classes as an example of a parasitical undermentioned species, successfully eradicated. Western Europe became a collection of elegant hollow client states. France produced wine and luxury goods. Scandinavia provided raw materials. All cultural output was vetted by the Reichskulturministerie. Jazz, abstract art, and degenerate philosophy were purged from memory. In the East, Japan's Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere solidified into a rigid hierarchy. China was bled white. Its coastal megacities like Shanghai and Guangzhou transformed into towering, neon-lit hubs of Japanese commerce, while its interior remained a starving pre-industrial hinterland for resource extraction. Korean was a language spoken only in secret. In public, it was a crime. Southeast Asia's jungles were systematically cleared for rubber and oil palm plantations. There was no Beatles, no Hollywood, no anime as we know it. Popular culture was a tool for imperial propaganda, stirring symphonies glorifying the emperor's divine destiny, or films depicting the noble sacrifice of Japanese soldiers for the Pan-Asian ideal. The true lingering Cold War was not between democracy and communism, but between the two victorious fascist blocs themselves. The Nazi-Japanese alliance had always been a marriage of convenience. By the late 1950s, the demarcation line, a heavily fortified frontier running from the Ural Mountains down through a partitioned, puppet-controlled Iran into the Indian Ocean, became the most militarized border on Earth. It was called the Silent Line. Spy satellites, a technology developed decades earlier than in our timeline, born from the V-2 rocket and relentless military competition, watched over no man's land. Proxy wars were fought in the splintered remains of Africa and the Middle East over resources. Both empires raced for the ultimate weapon, but the Nazis, with their head start in rocketry and no ethical constraints, tested the first atomic bomb over a demonstration site in the Siberian tundra in 1954. Japan followed suit 3 years later. The balance of terror was established, but it was a more brittle, paranoid terror than the one we knew. You, born into this world in, say, 1990, would understand a different reality. Your identity is your racial classification, barcoded on an identity chip implanted at birth. If you are of approved stock in the European Reich, you might be a mid-level engineer in a Frankfurt aerospace complex, designing surveillance satellites. Your life is comfortable but prescribed. You vacation in the sanitized Alps, not the Mediterranean. You watch state-produced entertainment on a wall-sized television that also watches you. Marriage is an eugenic contract approved by the state. History is a closed book that tells only one story, the inevitable triumph of the will. If you are in the Japanese sphere, you are a salaryman in a Shanghai corporate conglomerate. You speak Japanese fluently, bow to a portrait of the emperor each morning, and work 14-hour days. Your ancestral culture is a folkloric hobby, permitted only in sanitized festivals. Dissent is not just illegal. It is a symptom of spiritual sickness, treated with re-education. Innovation is stagnant but specialized. Computers exist, but the decentralized creative chaos of the personal computer revolution never happened. Networks are centralized, closed, and monitored. Medicine has made advances in trauma surgery and genetic screening for ideal traits, but research into diseases that affect non-priority populations is unfunded. The environment is a resource to be consumed. The Amazon and Congolian rainforests are gone, logged to feed the endless construction of the two empires. Global warming is a more advanced ignored crisis. There are no United Nations, no Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The very concepts of humanity and rights are divided by racial theory. International travel is for the elite and the military. The world feels both vast and claustrophobic, vast in the reach of control, claustrophobic in the narrowness of permitted thought. This world did not come from a sudden revolutionary flash. It descended like a slow, heavy twilight, one logical step after another from those victories in 1940, 1941, and 1942. It is a world where the darkest impulses of the 20th century, racial fury, imperial ambition, totalitarian control, were not defeated, but became the foundation stones of global civilization. The silence you hear is the sound of 100 alternative histories, 1 billion potential lives, songs, inventions, and loves forever unborn. It is the echo of the world we know, snuffed out. We live in the fragile, precious timeline where, against the odds, the light held back that twilight. This thought experiment is not a game. It is the shadow that makes our own light visible. It is the ghost of a past we narrowly escaped, and it remains the most potent warning for our future.